fight against our armed forces in Iraq and Afghanistan.
To fight against armed. And
another kid in year 11 stepped in and said, what are you doing? Pushed him over, broke his arm.
No, he had in the headlock.
Wait, well, doesn't that mean he had a broken arm? Wait, I'm so confused. Wait, what? Okay, we're gonna watch this video and then I'm gonna see if this brings up anything relevant and then I'm gonna start to organize around my talking points, I think. Oh, and then I have 2 more things I need to go through quick, hopefully.
Just taking place in Bangladesh.
How is Farage getting away with so many lies?
Breaches of electoral law, Russian interference, foreign funding from billionaires and crypto. Deeply worrying and pretty authoritarian Orban MAGA-style anti-women's rights and abortion agenda, violent rhetoric, close ties to convicted criminals. He just gets away with again and again and again and again.
People assume that Farage is a bit of a bullshitting rogue, and therefore when all this stuff happens, it's sort of rolled into the general picture.
Trump created a media landscape that gives up on proper scrutiny, and I think we're seeing the same develop with Farage. This is a network, and Farage is fundamental to that network. I just wish our bloody media would grow up a bit and start to join a few dots.
Wow.
Welcome to the Restless Politics Question Time with me, Rory Stewart.
And me, Alistair Campbell. And Rory, we're going to talk about Nigel Farage and reform. We're going to talk about elections in Thailand, as we promised last week, but also in Bangladesh. Fascinating election just taking place in Bangladesh. We're going to talk a little bit about Munich, and then I know you want to, having been sort of pretty vile about Keir Starmer on his Munich speech, you want to be nice about him in relation to something else. So we've got lots to get through, but where do you want to start?
I'm going to start with a question from Alison Cohen. How is Farage getting away with so many lies?
Well, it's not just lies. I think Farage gets away with murder. And I think the rise of Reform UK, or what Chris Mason of the BBC likes to call the rise of Reform UK, has actually happened despite and in part because most of the media largely play down, not just the lies, but the controversies and the scandals. We're talking about breaches of electoral law, Russian interference.
Hold on. This guy. This might be the one. This might be the one that you gotta give me. Holy shit. Holy shit. Holy shit, okay? Holy shit. People in chat are saying William Dafoe. That's not what I'm looking at. That's not the guy I'm looking at. I'm thinking, I don't know what the actor's name is, the guy that played Bishop in Alien. This guy. You gotta give me this one. Come on. You gotta give me this one.
Most of the media largely play down, not just the lies, but the controversies and the scandals. We're talking about breaches of electoral law, Russian interference, his role in Brexit, foreign funding from billionaires and crypto. Deeply worrying, and shout out to Natasha Devon on LBC at the weekend, pretty authoritarian Orban MAGA-style anti-women's rights and abortion agenda, violent rhetoric, close ties to convicted criminals. We're seeing this with Trump. Trump created a media landscape that gives up, frankly, is slightly giving up on proper scrutiny. And I think we're seeing the same develop with Farage. Now, first of all, let me say, I'm not tarring everybody with the same brush. Pippa Crerar of The Guardian took me to task recently for saying the media are too soft on Farage when papers like The Guardian from time to time really go for them. But there are so many stories, Roy, that if these were about Labour politicians or even Tory politicians, it's not just a right-left thing, they would never be out of the news. And there's another common link, which is hugely underplayed, and that's Epstein.
Stop, I'm eating links. Crip Mac dissed you. Okay, I won't fight with any Crips.
I told you and Destiny, you remember with the blue hair?
Yes.
Which I remember you really liked the blue hair.
Yes.
You were the first person that I shared that with.
Yeah, Destiny, I remember with the blue hair.
No, it was a guy.
Are you sure?
Yeah. He's like a pretty famous streamer.
I don't remember that.
But some people do think he's a girl, like just based on the name. You don't remember that?
I don't remember. You gotta show me a clip.
Yeah, I'll show you a picture of
That's strange on these shows these days.
just a guy named Destiny. I know this kind of...
Okay, thank you. I feel dissed.
And Steve Bannon, both jailbirds, like George Cottrell, the man Farage calls, like a son, and whose book on money laundering he and other key reform figures attended. But let me just go through a few. 17 breaches of the parliamentary rules by Farage. 17. I don't know how many times you broke the rules. I suspect it was 0. Nathan Gill, I've been banging on about this for yonks and yonks and yonks. There was media interest in Nathan Gill for one day only, the day he went to jail for taking bribes from Russia. The whole crypto world, I think we just don't understand just how deep they are into this. Farage's use of a private company to pay corporation tax on all his outside earnings rather than income tax, which means it's 25%, not 40%. And surprise, surprise, says he won't publish his tax returns if he becomes Prime Minister. And, then there's all these things that just get forgotten in the midst of times. Farage claimed he never met the Russian ambassador, but he did. He claimed that he bought a house in Clacton, but he hadn't. Aaron Banks, his right-hand man, the bad boy of Brexit, said he'd had one boozy lunch with Russian officials. Then it was 2 or 3, then it was 4. It turns out it's almost a dozen. Richard Tice, we'll come on to working from home later. Richard Tice, who works from home in Dubai with his lovely wife, Isabel Oakeshott, he had relations with this Russian guy and didn't declare them until the journalists got hold of it. I mean, maybe he was going to register it, but the truth is that he didn't register it until Hope Not Hate, the campaign group, got hold of it and challenged him over it. And then just this week, before you kind of come back at me on some of this, just this week, this pattern of admission and dismissal. So you kind of say, no, we didn't do that. Oh, yeah, well, maybe we did, but does it really matter? And that's helped get rid of an apparent electoral law breach in the by-election taking place in Manchester. And just this week, another one. Repeatedly, Farage, this is his kind of line of the moment, going on radio radio, going on television, going on social media, saying that 1 million people in Britain cannot speak English, okay? When he knows that is untrue, because he's actually written the true figure in an article in the Daily Telegraph earlier. It's actually 161,000. So whether you go, his warm words for Putin, his apologies for Russian aggression, if you poke the Russian bear with a stick, he'll respond, his endorsement of Andrew Tate, his meeting with Assange, his fundraising to support, get this, a Russian-backed campaign to split California. Now, Farage didn't know at the time necessarily that this was kind of Russian involvement, but it is nonetheless a bit weird. The thing about the press and the media, part of the strategy, this is Natasha Doven made this point in LBC, part of Farage's strategy at the moment is to keep calling press conferences. So the press trot in, and either he gets on the news saying how bad Labour are being that day, or he throws out some new little sort of firework. So the other day it was, let's stop all this working from home nonsense. Brackets, one of his big backers is a big office space guy, probably totally unrelated. I'm just asking the question, as Nigel might say. This episode is powered by Fuse Energy.
Most of us are buying energy in the dark, not knowing what it costs.
Whoa.
You wouldn't do that with your weekly food shop, but with energy, you're often charged first and only find out the number later.
When you don't have that clarity, you usually end
I
up
don't have
paying
the time for this, guys, I'm sorry. Thank you.
morganstanley.com/politics.
We'll go check it out.
But here's the thing about working from home. His home, work-wise, is Clacton. He's never there. His wife worked from home when he was an MEP. It's the hypocrisy that he just gets away with again and again and again and again. And if you think about when I was a journalist, the local government, let's take local government. We've now got these reform councils, lots of defections, lots of cronyism, lots of stuff, lots of absolute incompetent people doing incompetent things. It barely figures on the national news. When Labour had, do you remember the loony left?
I remember the loony left.
You remember the loony
Derek
left?
Hatton.
Wasn't it? It was like, all the CND stuff and all the kind of, So the loony left became a national media story. Why is reform in local government not getting any national coverage, given we have the rise and rise of reform, and they're basically saying this guy's nailed on as Prime Minister? So is it a fair point, Rory, that this lot get away with murder compared with the other people who want to be Prime Minister, such as Keir Starmer?
Yeah, I think that it's definitely true that somehow you get a sense that different standards are applied. And it is worrying because it's a little bit like Trump. I think part of the reason he gets away with it is that it's sort of priced in. People assume that voters assume that Farage is a bit of a bullshitting rogue. And therefore, when all this stuff happens, it's sort of rolled into the general picture. And part of the problem for Starmer, I guess, is that Starmer came in on a big message of a sort of moral campaign, challenging the Conservatives, bringing seriousness to government, bringing rectitude. And therefore, it's a more appealing story to a journalist to point to sort of hypocrisy and say, this guy sets himself up as a saint and here's all this stuff going wrong. I think the second thing is that, to be fair for a second, and to try to play the other side, what you're talking about is a very worrying pattern. And, we can develop that a bit. You didn't talk that much about the funding, but I think one of the things that worries me most is our rules in Britain are so lax in terms of who can give money. You don't actually have to be a British citizen to give money. You just have to be on the electoral register, or you'll have to have a UK company. So that theoretically, Elon Musk could put, people have been exploring this, how could he possibly put £67 million into a campaign through some UK company?
Well, he's now backing Rupert Lowe, apparently. Farage is not quite... He'll end up backing Tommy Robinson, I suspect, and Tommy Robinson, of course, is backing Matt Goodwin in the Manchester by-election. So, but the funding, you're right about the funding.
Thank goodness, still,
Wait, is that true? Does Tommy Robinson back the Goodwin guy? Wait, does Goodwin and Tommy Robinson... That's one of the two things I wanted to go over today, is some Tommy Robinson stuff. Is that true? They have like a friendly relationship, or
Matt Goodwin in the Manchester by-election. So, but the funding, you're right about the funding.
Thank goodness, still, we are not in a situation of Farage actually breaking the law. Right? These things are him, conflicts of interest, breaking of parliamentary regulations, sailing very close to the wind. But so far, he's not been convicted of a crime. And the parliamentary commissioner has said that he thinks these things are inadvertent. But you're completely right. The general pattern of populism, polarization, post-truth, strange links. We haven't talked much about these extraordinary revelations of the fact that when I was in Theresa May's government, it turns out that Steve Bannon, Trump's big kind of right-hand ideologue, had relocated to Britain and was there cheerfully sending emails saying, I'm meeting Boris Johnson, I'm meeting Nigel Farage, and we're just about to bring down Theresa May, and I've just written a speech for Boris Johnson for his resignation. It's all the stuff when Boris Johnson resigns as Foreign Secretary and they're trying to trigger May to go. I had no idea. I wonder whether Theresa May was aware.
I very much doubt it.
And then where was Dominic Cummings and all this? Because, of course, Dominic Cummings is a figure very much part of the same ecosystem, the same polarizing Brexit, tech bro ecosystem, which Steve Bannon's adjacent to. And of course, he becomes Boris Johnson's chief of staff. So what's all that story? What's that moment going on? Because I came quite innocently into that leadership race against Boris Johnson when Theresa May fell, without any idea that somewhere in the background were these sort of extraordinary figures like Bannon floating around. And of course, in retrospect, presumably Dominic Cummings pushing Boris Johnson's campaign from the beginning.
And the thing about Bannon, of course, if you remember when Brexit happened, and in a rare moment of candour, Nigel Farage was being filmed and turned to the camera and said, here's to you, Steve Bannon, you did this. So that's been going on for a long time. And of course, Steve Bannon, like a lot of these MAGA people, there is an element to him of being a complete bullshitter. And therefore he wants you to think that I can bring down Theresa May, I can get Boris Johnson into power, or what have you. But the truth is, Steve Bannon is fundamental, central to this international network of Orban. We were in Munich the other day, Rubio makes his speech, all the European diplomats go, wasn't that wonderful? He didn't tell us we were terrible. What's the first thing he does? He gets on a plane, he goes to Slovakia and then Hungary to see Orban, to say Trump wants Orban to win the Hungarian election. This is a network. And Farage is fundamental to that network. And what he manages, because of the sort of cheeky chappy, having a fag, having a pint, sort of, just being a kind of cosplaying man of the people, is he manages to to sort of dismiss this stuff like Trump does. They all learn from each other. You and I were in Davos. Nigel Farage was in Davos. And Nigel Farage was doing lots of interviews saying, oh, back Donald Trump on this and Keir Starmer's terrible, what have you. None of them, so far as I know, have actually done it. None of the broadcasters who happily had him on air have actually asked the questions and found the answers. Well, who paid for you to be there?
I think if you looked at his past carefully, he wasn't there under his own name. He was actually there as a sort of +1, as a sort of assistant to a British Iranian businessman.
Yeah, yeah. And then you have all this stuff about he's got these links to the crypto world. And then, again, back into Epstein. Epstein, Peter Thiel, celebrating Brexit. This is just the beginning. Epstein and Bannon Bannon boasting about having all these European parties that are going to do well in the European elections. We can stop any of the regulation for crypto. So I just wish our bloody media would grow up a bit and start to join a few dots instead of just thinking that Farage is a useful guy to get on day after day after day and say the government is terrible. He did it with the Tories and now he does it with Labour, and that's how they use it.
We also need very, very quickly to get clear campaign finance reform.
Which the government are talking about, aren't they?
They're talking about, but it's not coming through. I mean, if we genuinely are facing a risk of Nigel Farage taking over, we need to build the institutions now to protect democracy properly.
Yeah.
And that means we need to stop non-British nationals being able to pour lots of money in. I personally think, actually, we should stop private individuals and trade unions being able to pour millions of dollars in. We should be following the South Australia model. We should put very clear rules about crypto. Cryptos are very...
Is South Australia a part of the UK or something? What the is South Australia?
It's being able to pour millions of dollars in. We should be following the South Australia model. We should put very clear rules about...
Oh, it's a state in Australia. Okay.
Crypto is a very strange thing. Very difficult to trace. What are the origins of things? We should have much clearer views on declarations. I mean, what we're seeing again and again, part of this stuff we're seeing with Farage, who's paying for his trips, how they're being declared. We saw this in spades with Mandelson. People not declaring getting on private planes, and then completely changing the way in which ministers are trained on security. So I was very surprised when I became a minister and when I ended up eventually on the National Security Council, that I didn't get anything like the briefing that I got when I was a diplomat. So when I, as a 21-year-old, joined the government, there were very, very clear training around the Official Secrets Act, the sensitivity of information, how to protect sources, how to make sure there weren't conflicts of interest. Certainly in my day, ministers simply didn't get the same seriousness and depth of people reinforcing that they're dealing with the most sensitive information in the world that could put agents' lives at risk, that could allow wealthy bankers to make millions of pounds. So absolutely with Farage, but I'd also like someone to come up with a solution. I mean, as well as us identifying the problem, how do we put the principles and policies in place now to make sure that our politics is cleaner in the future than it is now?
The fact that it needs to be cleaner, there's no doubt about that. And, Gordon Brown on the back of the Epstein stuff and Peter Mandelson came out and had all sorts of proposals. As I said at the time, I worried that was sort of tarring them all with the same brush, like, hypocrite, I think I do sometimes with the media. But let me just give you another example of the double standard here. Let's imagine that I, or Peter Mandelson, or somebody who was associated with New Labour, wrote a book called How to Launder Money. And let's imagine that Tony Blair, Gordon Brown, Keir Starmer, David Lammy, Yvette Cooper all turn up.
Okay, this is just going to be a video complaining about the state of UK politics. I don't think I'm going to get anything new from this, right? Are your gang things, is this like is that like your Epstein stuff? Wait, what is this? Hold on. Our gang inquiry is only just starting to scratch the surface. There is so very much evil among us. Do not kid yourselves. This is happening now, today, all over Britain. It is an organized criminal network of rape and slavery. It is so much worse than people realize. Gang survivor. It was all of the white girls in every home that I went to. And I mean, I've seen girls locked. I remember a man opening the back of a van and I saw maybe 15, 20 girls locked in dog cages. Looked like they're on drugs. Image quotes survivor from UK grooming gang scandals, organized networks that groomed and trafficked vulnerable white girls in places like, is it Rotherham? Am I pronouncing that? Or is it like Rotherham or Rotterdam? Do you say these things differently? What does Boner Bucks say? The notion that there was a pattern of on-street grooming by mostly Pakistani gangs was popularized by an article written by Andrew Norfolk in The Times in 2011. The investigation used 17 court prosecutions between 1997 and 2011, which identifies 56 offenders, 53 of whom were Asian. Do you guys consider Pakistani people Asian? I think you guys consider Indians Asian. Do you consider Pakistani people Asian? No, yes, no, yes. Yes, yes, yes. In other words, this pattern was based on an average of 4 offenders per year. To put that into context, there were no less than 6,134 convictions for CSA. Is that child assault in the year of 2021 alone? Grooming gang is not a legal term. It isn't recorded in police data, and it isn't used in the courts. It is a press term that has dominated the national discourse on CSA for over a decade, despite the fact that it only accounts for a marginal number of cases and offenders. Norfolk's article. UK police used to routinely dismiss victims as streetwise and consenting child prostitutes. Jesus Christ. 2022 inquiry. Victims of CSE. What is that? Child sexual exploitation. Were frequently seen by police and other professionals as making a choice, such as to be child prostitutes who consented to their own abuse. Like 17-year-olds or like 12-year-olds. Police identified the force using too narrow a working definition of CSE. A related difficulty arises if a police force has too narrow a working definition of child sexual exploitation. I believe some officers certainly had this. For example, the view that child sexual exploitation was about red light areas and was about gangs of men, principally of Pakistani heritage, led not only the force, but also probably the whole partnership to look for signs of exploitation in the wrong places. One superintendent describing the exploitation challenge today in his area characterized the local problem of revolving around white European males in their mid-40s, making extensive use of the internet for initial grooming, often of boys, and not operating as gangs at all. This is a very different profile. Direct involvement, December 2024. 2 former Rotherham police officers arrested on suspicion of CSA. Crimes involving 2 girls between 95 and 99. Grooming Gangs Task Force set up in 2023 under Sunak. And Sunak was the Tory leader for 1 year after he was the last one, after Truss was there for 50 days. Truss. Sunak was for about 2 years. And then Keir Starmer, that's how you say his name. Okay. Arrested over 550 suspects in 12 months. Identified and protected over 4,000 victims. Okay, the J Report 2014. Within the council, we found no evidence of children's social care staff being influenced by concerns about the ethnic origins of suspected perpetrators when dealing with individual child protection cases, including CSE. Perception that messages conveyed by some senior people in the council and police were to downplay the ethnic dimensions of CSE. Unsurprisingly, frontline staff appeared to be confused as to what they were supposed to say and do, and what would be interpreted as racist. Too much reliance on traditional community leaders, whilst Pakistani women felt disenfranchised. Women and men in the community voiced strong concerns that other than 2 meetings in 2011, there were no direct engagements with them about CSE over the past 15 years. Frontline staff of the police did not report personal experience of attempts to influence their practical or decision-making because of the ethnic issues. Those involved in CSE recalled a general nervousness towards discussions about ethnicity. Let's see, victim blaming, other failures. We have victim blaming, lack of communication with the wider Pakistani community, focus on local imams, whilst people who had more information were disenfranchised, lack of resources, especially for reach-out services, lack of training for frontline police and council workers. All right, let's fucking watch this one. Fuck it. Why did you start this here?
Is horrific, has always been.
So you're rolling over like Mark Zuckerberg as well?
Do you believe he has a right to sue people?
For Donald Trump.
Does he have a right to sue people?
Of course he has a right to, but is he right to?
Then we're agreed.
Is he right to?
Then we're agreed.
Dodging.
Then we're agreed.
No, it doesn't. No, we're not agreed. Do you support his lawsuit? Yes or no?
Doesn't matter.
Wrong? It's a very simple question.
Doesn't matter.
Oh, you're too scared to answer. Go on.
No, Donald Trump
Answer
sues people all the
question.
time.
Do you think he's right to sue the pollster? And do you agree with it? You have strong views, Piers, but you're not telling me to.
Let's get to your strong. Let's get to your strong views, Mehdi.
Oh yeah, let's change the subject.
No,
so
I think you've forgotten whose show it is.
Do you support Donald Trump's lawsuit?
It's not your show.
Do you support Donald Trump's lawsuit?
It's not your show. I'm asking you the questions.
All right. Well, everyone can see that you don't want to answer the question.
They can. They can see that I want to ask you questions, not have you pepper me with questions. Now, let me ask you a question. This gang scandal in the UK is horrific, has always been horrific. I think it was despicable in terms of the details. I think it was despicable it took so long for it all to get properly exposed. I still don't think it has been. I think it was utterly despicable that the scale of the cover-up, whether it was the police, whether it was council officials, whether it was social workers, everyone whose job it was to protect these young girls failed them spectacularly. I think on that we're probably completely in agreement.
Yes.
Vance launches into Trump's war on fraud by suspending Medicaid payments to Minnesota. How much money is that? That seems kind of spooky, no? We've decided to temporarily halt certain amounts of Medicaid funding that are going to the state of Minnesota in order to ensure that the state of Minnesota takes its obligation seriously to be good stewards of the American people's tax money. Oz said the Trump administration had notified Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, a Democrat, of its plan, which would keep the state from receiving a $259 million Medicaid reimbursement this month. Jesus. Keep the state from receiving $259 million in Medicaid reimbursement. What is the state budget? Minnesota, 2025. Almost $70 billion. Okay. It's a good chunk of change, but not destroys the whole state. But damn, that's still pretty crazy. Okay. Oh, that was just for 1 month too, though. Jeez. Okay. If we projected that over 12 months, that would be, about $3 billion. It's getting to be more. Okay. It's kind of crazy. Jesus.
The issue that is raging now is whether there should be a new national inquiry and whether someone like Elon Musk, in his very blunt, often very abusive manner...
Isn't Gad Saad one of those proto-grifters from the marketplace of ideas / new atheist Delhunty type meta that don't know jack shit about anything? He's still making content. The Gad Saad dude is a crazy, retard. That guy's one of the dumbest. He's like Scott Adams, maybe even dumber, though.
as we've seen with the rhetoric he's used against Keir Starmer and Jess Phillips, and others,
dishonest.
which I don't agree with, the way he's phrased himself with some of these, particularly Jess Phillips after the murder of 2 MPs in the UK. So I think, again, we'd agree on that. But I've also taken the sort of back step and gone, actually, I do think there should be another national inquiry. I do think the first one, they didn't act on any of the findings anyway, but actually the first one was very wide-ranging. And actually what it needs, it seems to me, from all I've read and seen this week, it needs a more specific national inquiry that focuses specifically on this northern rape gang scandal in all the 50 towns and villages that was happening. So we can actually get to the bottom of exactly who got abused and raped, who did it, what happened to them, have the perpetrators properly been brought to account, have the ones who were here on, maybe dual passports being deported, whatever it may be. In other words, proper accountability right from bottom to the top, and potentially people go to prison over.
Okay, real quick, somebody leak me, what is the strongest example of like the gang stuff? Not just like sexual assault or whatever, but like this like idea of this coordinated child rape thing. Is what, like, can somebody leak me the strongest example? Is this a thing that actually exists, or is this like they're just like picking like numbers of sexual assaults and then saying or whatever? Somebody leave me like the strongest story on that if you can.
Over this, but not just the perpetrators of the rape, but perpetrators of the cover-up. Now, A, do you agree with that? And B, Elon Musk pushing this, is that actually a big problem? Notwithstanding you and I agree about the rhetoric being wrong.
So, okay, 2 questions. Let me deal with both of them. On number 1, I'm glad you asked that question. It's the first time I've been on your show, and we actually don't have to argue along left-right lines where I'm the lefty and you pretend not to be a right-winger. This isn't a left-right issue. It's actually an issue of what do you think is the right way forward, right? This is a horrific scandal. What happened to children in the UK is disgusting. It is one of the great crimes of our time. No doubt about that. And I can't even read the details. It's sickening, it's disgusting. And by the way,
Okay. Rotherham, how do you pronounce this stupid fucking word? Somebody like me, somebody's saying this. Child sexual exploitation scandal. From the late 80s until 2013, group-based child sexual exploitation affected an estimated 1400 girls, commonly from care home backgrounds in the town of Rotherham, South Yorkshire, or South Yorkshire, England. Between 97 and 2013, girls were abused by grooming gangs of predominantly Pakistani men. Researcher Angie Heel, who was hired by local officials and warned them about child exploitation occurring between 2002 and 2007, has since described it as the biggest child protection scandal in UK history. And then Rotherham is a constituency or just a city, or these fucking fake bullshit ass places. Okay, I see. 19 men and 2 women were convicted in 2016 and 2017 of sexual offenses in the town dating back to the late 1980s. What is a care home? Is this like foster, or not foster, but like for, I guess, children with no parents or whatever? Let me watch these guys go at it.
This happened, a lot of this, it's ongoing, obviously. It's an ongoing problem in every country. But, the real scandals happened 10, 15 years ago, and that's what's tragic that we're talking about it now. But I would say to you, look, on the national inquiry point, I don't know, it's not a left-right issue. So I did sit down this week to kind of get my thoughts together. What do I think about this? I'm not an expert on this stuff, nor are you. So kind of I looked at what the experts are saying, and 2 people I respect very much in this field. One is Professor Alexis Jay, who ran the independent inquiry on child sexual abuse. It was a 7-year investigation from 2015
What are we doing in my YouTube chat? Why are we speaking foreign languages right now, guys? Can you fucking chill?
to 2022, cost over £100 million. I think it's 468 pages long. I haven't been able to read all of it, but I read the 20 recommendations she made, Piers, and I think it's a scandal that the Conservative government, people like Liz Truss and Suella Braverman and Robert Jenrick, who are jumping on this far-right bandwagon, to quote Keir Starmer, outrageously did nothing, Piers.
Well, he's
In the
actually
14
reined
years they
back,
were
to
in
be fair,
office.
he's actually reined back on that phrase today in Parliament in PMQs, and he's said he understands
good
that,
for him.
he basically has made it clear you're not necessarily far-right if you think there should be a national inquiry, which I'm glad he's done.
No, of course not. And that wasn't the
I'm
point.
not far-right.
That wasn't the
I think
point. It's not. No. No, but that wasn't the point. His words were misconstrued. I heard his words. He was making very clear that Conservative politicians who are using this for political gain are jumping on a far right back. That's a set point. Obviously, calling for an inquiry is not far right. As I just said to you, I was about to call for an inquiry till I did some reading and said, here's what Alexis Jay said. She says I did this report, 460.
So there's a big problem with that report.
Recommendations. The Conservative.
Yeah, but you mentioned how many. Okay, but look, you mentioned how many pages are in the report. Do you know how many times Rotherham got mentioned?
No, but she did a separate report on Rotherham.
No, but do you know how many times it got mentioned in the national report?
But she did a report on Rotherham.
No.
She did a specific. There's an independent report on
Yeah, but
Rotherham.
about the national report. Do you know how many times it got mentioned, Rotherham?
No.
Once. So the absolute.
She also did a separate.
So the absolute.
She also did a separate.
No, my point though is that the.
Why, God, the counter signaling is so cringe. I don't understand why these blue MAGA snarkers are attacking my boy Hutchinson for being an actual liberal. I heard someone on his stream unironically argue for banning certain political parties. Blue MAGA snarkers. What? Okay.
Epicenter of this scandal was Rotherham. And yet it merited one mention in her national report. And that's the point that people are making, which is actually, that national report was so wide-ranging, taking in all sorts of different kinds of abuse, that it couldn't properly focus on this actual specific scandal of predominantly British Pakistani men abusing young white girls. That's the scandal that needs a proper laser-like focus, I think.
Well, okay, and that's fair enough. I think that we can debate about the Pakistani man angle. There's a big debate about the ethnicity factor, as you know. But just one last point.
Not really. The vast majority were British Pakistani.
Can I finish a sentence?
Well, they were.
That's not true.
In
those specific towns, yes, but as a phenomenon in the UK.
What do you mean it's not true?
As a national phenomenon, the Home Office... Can I finish a sentence, Piers? Or are we going to get through this interview?
Sure.
Every time I start a sentence, you interrupt me.
Go on.
The Home Office, under a Conservative government in 2020, put out a report, not sure if you've seen it, got a lot of coverage, saying that the majority of men in in grooming gangs, which is not a great phrase, are white men under the age of 30. That was the survey data that they found. They said we need more research. It's not a hard and fast result. We don't have enough ethnicity data. Do you know a lot of police forces, Piers, 30, 40, 50% of victims of perpetrators, they just don't register the ethnicity.
How many white
That's
men?
Not to say
How many white men?
gangs,
Okay. How many white
That's
men?
not to say specific
how many
gangs
white
in
men have been
Rotherham
charged?
and Rochdale and Telford were brown.
Okay. So let's just focus on...
But Piers, here's what bothers me. You asked me about Elon Musk.
Sorry,
Can you cut me off?
Hang on, I'm allowed to respond to what you just said. Because the reality is what you're doing is you're massively distorting... You're massively distorting the story, aren't you?
No, you are.
How
I
many
started
white,
telling you about
how many
Alexis
white
J.
men?
You jumped in with your gotcha about Rotherham. Have you read the 20 recommendations of Alexis J's report? Can you tell me
gotcha.
20 recommendations?
Gotcha.
How many times is Rotherham mentioned in the report? It is. Have you read the 468-page report?
Many. When I went on your show recently, I let you ask me all sorts of questions because it was your show. Okay, I'm asking.
And I let you answer them. You haven't let me finish a sentence.
I have. You keep saying things which I want to challenge. You keep saying things I want to challenge.
Hang on. And then you challenge them. So let me just say them. I promise. I say them and then you challenge me.
Let me ask you a question.
I'll say them really fast. I speak really fast. Let me just say them. Alexis J says no need for a new inquiry because her 20 recommendations,
I don't agree with
you don't know what they are, haven't been implemented yet.
I know.
That's fine. I do agree with her. David Greenwood, who was the lawyer for the victims in Rotherham. You mentioned Rotherham as a gotcha, I think. David Greenwood was the lawyer in Rotherham of the girls. He was that's my opinion. I have a right to opinion. David Greenwood, the lawyer in Rotherham, of the dozens of girls, he's the guy who represented the girls in Rotherham. He says, I don't think we should have another inquiry. There's too many inquiries. We need action. We need to get the recommendations done. Another inquiry, he says, would be a distraction. Now, that's not a gotcha on my end either. Maybe we should have another action inquiry. I don't feel that strongly about it. I'm just telling you, Piers, for your viewers who are following Elon Musk nonsense, a man who knows nothing about this stuff, that David Greenwood, a lawyer involved in this, and Alexis J, who did an inquiry in Rotherham and then did a national inquiry, says we shouldn't have another inquiry.
Yeah, and I'm making the point that in her national inquiry, she mentioned... I'm making the point in her national inquiry, she mentioned Rotherham once, and there to me is the problem. But the other problem...
And in her Rotherham inquiry, she covered it in detail. She also said, don't make a link between Pakistani men and this problem. Because white men also involved in grooming gangs.
Rape gang scandal and the 50 towns and villages involved in this gang scandal. Tell me this. You've just tried to suggest that more white men were doing it than British Pakistani men. Bit of a surprise, I think, to everyone you've just named who've done the report. Okay, so how many white men involved in this gang scandal?
Home Office research, Piers. Hang on.
How many white men have been taken to court, charged and or convicted of raping these white girls in these 50 towns and villages? Just for the record.
Okay. All right, I don't have the full numbers, but let me give you some examples. In 2023 in Glasgow, there were 7 years of child sex crimes prosecuted. Piers, we don't have the percentages. That's the whole point.
We know that the very vast majority are actually British Pakistanis.
So hold on.
You're trying to deflect it into thinking it's somehow white men doing all this.
Oh my God. So in Glasgow, there were white men. 11 people abused 3 children, one of them in a nappy diaper.
I'm not talking about Glasgow.
We're not talking about that, nor is Elon Musk. In the West Midlands, a decade of child sex crimes. 21 white people abused 7 children, all of them under the age of 12.
Right.
In Cornwall, in 2010,
these aren't the scandals we're talking about,
sex crime. 6 men.
Okay. I feel like I think I understand more. Okay, so this was a real thing that there was a, in Rotherham or whatever, there was some kind of child sex ring fucking thing that was very bad that seemed like it had some degree of organization and everything, right? Like taxi drivers, and it was primarily Pakistani taxi drivers picking up like little white British girls to gang and do really bad fucky shit with. This was a real thing that wasn't investigated or received an appropriate amount of attention until I guess like mid 2010s until 2013. They went back and I guess they investigated or arrested people related to this. But this refers to a very particular thing. But now the claim that people like Piers or other people are pushing is that the majority of the rape, or that there are a ton more of these like rings all over the UK, which I don't know if there's any evidence for that. And then they're trying to like rope in like all as part of like a gang thing, and then they don't want to look at anybody raping besides the ethnic groups of whatever when they're Pakistani or Asian or whatever. Is that what we're doing here? Because that's what it sounds like these two are getting hung up on. Piers is focusing on the Rotherham scandal or whatever, which seems like it was predominantly Pakistani men or almost completely. But Mehdi is saying that there was a report done on all the types of like grooming and everything done in the country, and that obviously encompasses way more than just the Rotherham stuff.
Men. Well, I'll get to that in a moment. 6 men abused 30 girls, the youngest of whom was 5 years old. And you've just made my point for me. These are the scandals we're not talking about. Why? Why are we defining child sex crimes and grooming gangs by race, unless you're a racist or trying to make political hay out of it? I care about the victims of all crimes. I don't give a damn whether the perpetrator was brown, black, white, blue, or yellow. I think we should support the victims of those crimes. And if you're only obsessed with the perpetrators, as Elon Musk is, as Robert Jenner is, then you don't actually care about these girls. That's what Alexis J said.
But the argument...
It's about on a per capita. It doesn't sound like Piers is making any per capita argument. It sounds like he's making the argument of literally just he wants to go back to just the particular Rotherham scandal or whatever.
As you know, the argument, as you know, from those who do want a big further inquiry, is that actually it was a very specific section of the community, a very specific section of the Muslim community, and it was British Pakistani men who they believe were operating under some warped cultural thing, which they felt entitled them to behave that way.
That's not proven, right? That's what we need. That's what we need. Obviously, more studying on, more research, and I agree with that because these guys in places like Rochdale, Rotherham, were British Pakistani men overwhelmingly in those cases.
Yes.
But it's very interesting that you pick a sample and then say these are the towns we're talking about. They're all brown. Well, why can't we talk about Cornwall or Glasgow or the West Midlands? I'm saying this is a phenomenon that happens nationwide. There are multiple. Piers, surely you'd accept there are multiple factors. There are experts on child sex abuse who you should invite on the show. I'm not one. Who will tell you there are multiple factors that cause this stuff. I mean, this happens in every country in the world. In these towns, clearly there were a lot of things going on. We know about police corruption. We should be talking about police corruption. In places like Rotherham, where the police knew what was going on, and there are allegations of like money and drugs going between the perpetrators and the police. These girls were treated badly, not just because they were white, Piers. Let's talk about the class issue, because they were seen as worthless. They were seen as poor, working class, not having any value or credibility. So there's a lot of things to talk about.
So where does this conversation about the white people doing it even come in? Well, Mehdi is, I think, making an argument for reports that found that on the broad, there's a lot of, I guess, like people raped or child sexual stuff or whatever. On the per capita, though, it might be that certain immigrants are more likely to commit these crimes than white natives. White natives? Fuck. Somebody link me crime stats on this. I need a link to that. But I think one of the accusations around this Rotherham stuff was that one of the reasons why it didn't receive the attention that it should have, or the investigatory attention that it should have, is because some of the institution here, the police or whatever else, were operating under kind of a fear of like they didn't want to be perceived as being racist or digging too much into a thing because they were racist. So that's why right-wing people or Piers is leaning into this idea of, well, a lot of this stuff is flying under the radar because we don't want to be perceived as racist by investigating it, so we need to be more honest and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Which it sounds like for this Rotherham thing, there was some degree of truth to that.
About here. And yes, we can talk about culture, but you know what? It's interesting you bring religion in. Religion is the most absurd thing of all. Do you think Islam sanctions any of this? These people applying girls with alcohol and drugs. Last time I checked, alcohol is forbidden in Islam. Even an ignorant person knows that. So any idea that this has anything to do with religion is absolutely absurd and laughable. And again, we don't define white people crimes by Christianity or Judaism. We don't talk about Hindu bankers or Jewish carjackers. I'm not sure why we're bringing religion into this. It's absolutely absurd. And last point on the victims, Piers, I just want to say this, and I'm sure you'll appreciate this point. The victims were overwhelmingly white, right? But they weren't only white. There's this new thing going on that these brown men decided to target white girls because they're seen as outside the community and fair game. Not true. If you read Alexis Jay's report on Rotherham, then you'll see that she points out that there were a lot of young Asian girls who were also abused by these men, but who didn't come forward because of, quote unquote, the shame in their community, their parents saying they'll never get married. So there are actually a lot going on here that we've just glossed over. And Elon Musk coming in with his disinformation, his racism, his Islamophobia, championing Tommy Robinson. Surely you would condemn the championing of an Islamophobic, violent bigot like Robinson, and lying that he's in prison because he uncovered this. Robinson had nothing to do with this.
I've been doing that for the last week.
You know, Piers, good. And Piers, you know that Tommy Robinson almost jeopardized a trial against a bunch of brown guys in Huddersfield with his contempt of court antics.
Twice. He nearly wrecked two trials.
He's not a champion of the victims of gangs.
No, he's not. What do you say? I'm genuinely curious what you think of this. You know, I said on X yesterday that Tommy Robinson is, to me, is the embodiment of an Islamophobe. He's Islamophobic. And there's plenty of examples of where his rhetoric, I think, stacks it up. To which a lot of people, including Gad Saad, who's coming after you, say there's no such thing as Islamophobia. That's the argument that they come up with, which is there is no such thing as Islamophobia, that you're allowed to be as critical as you want of Islam without being accused of being an Islamophobe. What do you say to that?
Can you imagine if I came on your show and said there's no such thing as anti-Semitism, you should be able to be as critical of Judaism as you want? That's an absurd position to state. It's a de facto bigoted position. People say nonsense stuff. You've heard it all, Piers. Oh, it can't be a phobia. That's an irrational fear. That's not what Islam. Well, we have homophobia. We don't say we don't use it. Am I a fan of the term Islamophobia? No, but anti-Semitism, homophobia, Islamophobia, all these are made up words to try and describe very real phenomenon, which is anti-Muslim bigotry, hate, discrimination, whatever you want to call it, right? The idea, look at Elon Musk, for example. He's now posting about Islamophobia being fiction. This guy who once pretended to be a liberal has gone full hard far right. He's backing a party in Germany, Piers, which is aligned with neo-Nazis who said outrageous things about Muslims and immigrants and minorities. The German intelligence community believes it's an extremist party. The German courts believe it's an extremist party. Musk is writing articles in German backing them. So this is where we are right now, where the normalization of bigotry and hate against minorities continues apace. And I think, Donald Trump winning is great to fight the woke. It's actually very worrying. We have a global far right. We have Orban, we have Trump, we have in the UK now, I was going to say Farage, but actually it's Tommy Robinson apparently, that Elon Musk favours, who are being propped up, and they take very, very disturbing views of all this. And Piers, I just want to say this. People think, Islamophobia blown out of proportion, exaggerated by Muslims. Let me just tell you this. In New Zealand, in Christchurch, you remember the two mosque attacks in the last Trump presidency, when a far-right attacker in New Zealand went and killed more than 50 Muslims as they prayed. Do you know what he had written on his ammunition, on his bullets? He had 4 Rotherham written on his bullets. Right? That is what happens when you politicize scandals, politicized controversies, turn very real problems into, pawns in your political game, into weapons to attack minorities. What happens is extremists then jump on that. That's what Keir Starmer was talking about. There is a far-right bandwagon. In Rotherham, an 81-year-old grandfather, Piers, in 2015, was beaten to death by a gang who shouted groomer at him. Right? So I'm not saying we shouldn't talk about this stuff. I'm on your show talking about it. I'm just saying how we talk about it is so important.
Is there also, fair enough. Fair enough. Is there also a problem, as the likes of Tommy Robinson have been screaming about now for a long period of time, albeit in my estimation purely for his own self-gain? But is there also a genuine problem in the way that Muslims in Britain who've come into the country have assimilated into communities? We have as many Muslims in Britain, I think, as America has, even though they're 5 times the size. Are there legitimate concerns that you might have about the way Muslims have assimilated or not? Is it fair to even ask the question?
Of course it's fair to ask the question, and I've asked the question myself. I've written about multiculturalism and integration and all these issues for over 20 years, back when I was in the UK for The Guardian, for The New Statesman. Again, it's how to do it, right? It's not my problem with the Telegraph and parts of the Times and, of course, the Daily Mail and the Daily Express is they do it in a jingoistic, belligerent, one-sided manner. I just gave you the example earlier. We talk about gangs. Let's talk about rape gangs. You only talk about Pakistani men. Why aren't you talking about the people in Cornwall or the West Midlands or Glasgow? That becomes a problem. I want us to be able to talk about this in a way that is fair and not discriminatory and not tropes about, oh, brown men are coming here to rape our daughters. That kind of stuff, Piers, I think you would agree is not helpful. Are there issues with integration in places like in some northern towns? Yes, by the way, integration is a two-way street. There's been a lot of white flight from some of those areas. There's been a lot of issues with white working class communities, as you know, with those areas, with deindustrialization, with globalization. There's a lot to get through here. It's not an easy topic. And if we're going to make sweeping generalizations about Pakistani men, well, the mayor of London, just elected for a third time, is the child of Pakistani immigrants. Why are we not talking about the success story that is the UK, which has a Muslim man as the first mayor of a major European city? Or in Scotland, where they elected a Muslim man to be the first Muslim British Pakistani descent, Hamza Yusuf, who was last year the first Muslim leader of a Western nation, right? There have been huge success stories that we don't talk about.
Mehdi Hassan, good to talk to you, as always. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Somebody, you were watching very carefully there, very intently. What do you make of what he said?
Well, I agree with about 60%. You started on woke ideology, and Mehdi seemed to deny that this had overridden and marched through our institutions. I think that's somebody in complete denial.
Yes, I do.
It seems to me very obvious that in the grooming gang scandal, the child rape scandal, there was a liberal bias about prosecuting mainly Pakistani men out of fear of cultural sensitivity. That is a catastrophe for us. You know, I think of academia, where 30 years ago, the number of academics, I think this is a poll in American university, who identified as conservatives in relation to those who identified as liberal, it was 2 to 1 in favour of liberal. Now it's gone to 10 to 1. There are some humanities subjects where it's over 100 to 1. I mean, I took a sabbatical from the Times and Sunday Times to do some research on cousin marriage. I think this is a scandal in this country. Very high proportion of people having cousin marriage. There are problems with cultural integration because when you marry cousins, you stay within a sequestered group and you don't integrate effectively. Also congenital difficulties because of genetic recessive disorders. I would phone scientists who had written papers. I wouldn't get a call back. They were worried about talking about...
Terrified of putting their...
Because it's predominantly Pakistani community. And there was a piece of evidence in a paper that I found out off the record that showed
important enough, and you bang that drum as Robinson has for a long time. It is complicated. It's more nuanced than people who take a visceral position either side would take, I think. Stay with us, Matthew. Fascinating to get your response to Mehdi. It might be even more fascinating to get your response to Gad Saad, who joins me now. He's visiting professor, global ambassador at Northwood University. Gad, great to have you back on Uncensored. And you and I have been having a little very friendly ding-dong on X the last few days. I want to start just by what Mehdi Hassan told me about Islamophobia, because I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think you're kind of the view it doesn't really exist and that you shouldn't be silenced from criticising Islam by people shouting you're Islamophobic. Now, Mehdi Hassan, and I subscribe to this as well, I think if you launch the kind of ferocious, relentless attacks that someone like Tommy Robinson has done on Islam and Muslims in the way that he's done so many times, it's eventually pretty painfully obvious to people that you're coming at this from a bigoted position. And therefore, by the dictionary definition of Islamophobia, if it comes from a place of hate, that actually is Islamophobia, isn't it?
Thank you so much for having me back, Piers. The devil is in the details, right? So if I were to say that Jews are inherently diseased, they are degenerates, they are evil, they're parasites, that would be anti-Semitic. If I say there are teachings in the Torah that are abhorrent given today's moral codes, that wouldn't be anti-Semitic. So if you were to make dispositional statements about individual Muslims, that would be Muslim bigotry. But if you say anything you want about the codified content of Islam, then by definition, that cannot be Islamophobic.
Okay, so let me play you a little mashup of examples, I would say, where Tommy Robinson has displayed Islamophobia by the criteria in the dictionary. Let's take a look.
We will unify every community against the hostility and barbarianism of Islam. I'm not racist, I despise racism. Islam is not a race, Islam is a fascist, violent ideology which masquerades as a religion.
Every single Muslim watching this video on YouTube, on 7/7, you got away with killing and maiming British citizens.
We embrace migrants that come to this country and love it. The problem is Islamic migrants...
Last meme. I don't know how much I'll dig into Tommy Robinson or not, but supposedly Konstantin does a whole bunch of, should I say whitewashing for white sane washing? I don't know of his views here, I'm not sure.
I've gone from being spat at, to being punched, to being hugged, to being embraced.
Before we get into all that, though, the one thing that I think is really important is for us just to understand for our audience and for ourselves, what's your story and who you are and how you got here, right? And I think that's a really big part of it that gets missed very often. People
I love this guy. I don't even know anything about this guy.
Have an idea about you, as I once did, by the way. I will say this, right? But they do not have the full picture. So let's talk about that. Tell us why you were here.
So that idea, I remember 2015 was the first chance I got to give a presentation of my life. It was Oxford University.
Yeah.
I walked into Oxford University, everyone hated me. I was getting booed, shouted at, screamed at. You know when you go to Oxford University debating society, you get 3-course meal, I didn't get any of that, yeah? I was invited in, but by the end of the presentation, I got a standing ovation. And all the people there said, I didn't know any of this, yeah? And I brought them back every time to growing up in Luton. And I remember saying to the audience, I don't know where you grew up, but please picture yourself. I'm going to tell you my story, what I saw growing up, what happened to my family members, all the changes I saw, and then ask yourself what you would have done. Keep asking yourself, what would you do if you saw this? So yeah, I was born in 1982 in Luton Town. My mum was an Irish immigrant to Luton. She's one of 8 from a poor family. And I grew up in a town that is one of the most diverse and multicultural towns in Europe, actually, in Europe. So I saw firsthand what it's like to grow up in a multicultural community, but also what it's like in a town that, when I was born, had 1 mosque in 1982 and now has 45.
Whoa.
So we're nearly at 50% Pakistani population of Muslims. And I saw the problems from that. And I spoke about them. And I guess when people say I'm guilty of things, I'd say, yeah, I'm guilty of being a decade ahead. But that's not because I had some golden light bulb or could see into the future. I just saw my hometown. I saw from growing up as a child to what had happened. And when I grew up, and again, I'll start off, so if you line all my friends up and you get 30 of us, The majority of us are sons of immigrants, whether it be St. Lucian, Bulgarian, Italian, Irish, all of us are sons of immigrants, yeah? I went to school, some of the best people I met growing up, some of the people I love from growing up are Muslim. But that doesn't change that there's a massive problem.
So talk to us about that, Tommy. You mentioned, look, I imagine most people listening to this can imagine what happened.
Wait, do you think so what is Tommy Robinson's background? Where did his parents come from? He had an Irish mother and an English father. Oh, okay. Is Irish considered English? Do you think if you had like an Indian, like an ethnically Indian parent and an ethnically English parent, whatever the fuck that means, would somebody like Konstantin consider you half English or not English or what?
Happens when a place goes from being mostly one group of people to mostly another group of people, right? And we have friends, we have a close friend of ours who grew up in Bradford, right? And he talks about what he experienced as a white guy in a mostly Pakistani school, right? Most people don't think about that. So when you talk about problems, right, what do you mean? Like, give us an example.
So I mean, going to school, and I noticed it when I got to high school, or even just, I talk about when we used to have an under-18s nightclub, and when people talk about racism and victim of racism, so I've been a victim of racism untold times. I remember going as a young group of lads going to an under-19s nightclub where we had to walk through the town. We'd get robbed, we'd get spat, in the end, we had to hide our money in our socks, because every time you went, you got robbed and mucked by Pakistani gangs. You get called a dirty gullah, little white boy, slapped around. So when people talk about racism, I think, I've experienced it my whole life. I've seen it my whole life. And when we're at school, so if you come into our high school, I went to a high school called Puttridge High School, which was still a majority non-Muslim school, but then they bussed children from the Muslim community up on buses into the school. Now, when you went into our school, and there's never been a racial tension in Luton. Never seen it. Never seen racism. The town is divided by religious lines. That's it. It's white and blacks like this growing up. And it always was, especially in Luton's football scene, which we can get onto. All of our groups of lads, we're a very diverse bunch of lads. Always have been. Luton's football hooligan element was always seen. The actual racist clubs from the 70s and 80s would always have a big day out in Luton, because Luton's lads that would be resisting them were always white and black, because that's what Luton has always been. But there was never really racial tensions at school, and we didn't create this. Muslim playground, that was the front playground. Non-Muslim playground at the back. So even in the playground, it was divided. When you walk into the school dinner hall, so go into the school dinner hall, and when you walk in, you'd have everyone sitting in a mix. Chinese, Indians, blacks, everyone sitting at tables together. In the corner, there'd be 10 tables of Muslims. That's just how it was.
And the playground, is that the school mandating that, or is it just how kids saw themselves out?
That's just how it divided.
Right.
That's just how it divided. And if one Muslim got in any fight, 100 of them got in a fight. So something very different. I've never seen that until I got to high school. And I got to high school and see 10 or 20 men booting one kid. And I've never seen that, because people had a fight before, and they just had a fight. Now, literally, and then when you get outside the school gates afterwards, if you say when we were 13, 14, and we had some trouble with some Pakistani kids at school, and trouble's going on, when you come outside school, there'd be 30 men. There's no 30 black men or white men coming up to school, they're all at work, yeah? But there's 30 Pakistani men waiting outside school to confront the 12, 13, 14-year-old kids. So I saw that. Also at school, I very quickly saw young girls that were at our school, we viewed them at the time as children. I'll be honest, we used to view them as slags at that time, because the girls who were 13 were getting picked up by Pakistani men outside. They'd come up to school gates and literally pick the girls up in school uniforms, and the girls would be going out and giving blowjobs to taxi drivers, and we'd all know what's going on. But we never viewed them as victims at that time as children. We were children, and they were going out, basically, they were victims of this grooming gang. My cousin, when she was 14, she woke up naked in a house in Bury Park, being raped by loads of bearded men. She ran out on the streets, and the prostitutes rang her dad. The street prostitutes rang her dad. She was just a child.
Sorry to interrupt, Tommy. When was this?
This was when I was 13 years old.
So that would have been 96 or 95?
96, 95. And a lot, I do this at Oxford University, a lot happened in my life at that time, which whatever happens in your life shapes your worldview, shapes your view, you understand. Even there was a murder of a gentleman called Mark Sharp. Google this murder. Yeah? Mark Sharp was with his son. His son was my age, probably when I was 11, 12. His son was my age. He was friends with my uncles, and he's drove past, and he's had a bit of a road rage with a car full of Pakistanis, and he's called them a wanker as he's gone past. They've followed him. They've called for reinforcements.
He said his sister was when she was 14 or 13. What, is there like a news article or anything of that? Or is there any just to make sure this actually happened? Oh, it was his cousin? Ugh. I feel like that's vague enough that... More
cars have turned up. As he's got out with his 12-year-old son to get a takeaway, they've jumped out, they've beaten with bats, beaten with poles. There was an explosion of violence in Luton that we didn't understand at the time, coming from the Muslim community. When we go back and speak to the elders in our community, it seemed to have been stemming from the Gulf invasion. After the Gulf, something was happening in Luton. They've followed him. And he's drove past. Mark Sharp was with his son. Shapes your worldview, shapes your view, you understand. Even there was a murder of a gentleman called Mark Sharp. Google this.
Mark Sharp killing United Kingdom. Murder charge has been dropped. Why? Let's see. A man charged with a murder committed in Bedfordshire 9 years ago. 9 years ago? How long does your court system take? Damn! It's appeared at Luton Crown Court. Mark Sharp has been died after being attacked by a group of men in a takeaway restaurant in Hightown Road. Abdul Abdin, 31, who had been in Bangladesh, turned himself into police last week. Remanded in custody. Another man is already serving a life sentence for Mr. Sharp's murder. Mr. Abdin had been held in custody awaiting extradition from Bangladesh for 43 months. Is there a information about this story? Callous yarn burglar denied knowing pal Mark Sharp, who died driving stolen off-roader in A19 Special. About 5:50 p.m. on the afternoon of Sunday, 27th of August, 95, as Mark Sharp was driving his motor car. He was forced to brake sharply when a black Nova motor car driven by Mr. Abdul Shahid stopped suddenly in front of him. Displeased by the actions of the driver of the Nova car, Mark Sharp overtook, making a rude gesture as he did. Shortly afterwards, he parked his car in Hightown Road near a laundrette Does that mean laundromat? Novikar pulled up beside him and the 4 Asian occupants, Shahid the driver, Mr. Jamir Mia, Mr. Forad Mia, and Mr. Abdul Tahid got out and confronted Sharp. An argument ensued, and one of the 4 who had been traveling in the Novikar returned to the car to make a call on a mobile telephone. Shortly afterwards, 2 other Asians, Mr. Rajan Udin and Mr. Abdul Abadan, and possibly 2 others, joined the 4 occupants of the Novikar. They were obviously friends. The 2 new arrivals appeared to Mr. Hughes, a witness, to be older and bigger than the original 4. Sharp and the 6 Asians were all on the pavement and close to a wall. Mr. Hugh turned to go back to his car and had hardly taken a step or 2 when hearing a noise. He turned and saw that the 6 Asians were attacking Sharp. 3 of them appeared to be using weapons made out of the bottom half of a snooker cue. What, bro, these are not real fucking words. Oh my God. The 2 new arrivals appeared to be Mr. Hughes, a witness, to be older and bigger than the original 4. Sharp. The 2 new arrivals appeared to be Mr. Hughes, a witness. Wait, so 2 different people? Okay, so I'm so fucking confused. Is Mr. Hughes and a witness, are these 2 people supposed to be friends of Mark Sharp? Sharp and the 6 Asians were all on the pavement and close to a wall. Mr. Hughes turned to go back to his car and had hardly taken a step or 2 when hearing a noise. He turned and saw that the 6 Asians were attacking Sharp. The appeared to use weapons. He saw Sharp being hit around the head and generally all over the body. The 3 who did not have weapons were punching and kicking Sharp. As he was being hit around the head, Sharp held his knees, but the attackers carried on until he fell down completely and was lying still. The 6 attackers then ran after their car. The attack had lasted, he thought, 30 seconds. He saw no attempt by Sharp to strike at the attackers or deliver any blows. I mean, if it was 6-on-1, probably not. His impression was that all 6 attackers were taking part in the violence, but he could not say which of them used weapons or which of them kicked or punched. Mr. Tatham on the laundrette also witnessed the attack. He had come from a shop about 2 doors away. Okay, not good. Not a good thing. 5 of those who were said to have taken part in the attack were arrested and charged with the murder of him. The 5 who were charged were tried on the Crown Court at Luton before Mr. Justice Dyson and a jury. These 2 were convicted of murder and sentenced for life. Other 3 were acquitted from murder but convicted of manslaughter. A stab wound delivered with moderate force near the base of the skull. Jesus. All right, well, this definitely happened. All right.
It's murder, yeah? Mark Sharp was with his son. His son was my age, probably when I was 11, 12. His son was my age. He was friends with my uncles. And he's drove past and he's had a bit of a road rage with a car full of Pakistanis. And he's called them a wanker as he's gone past. They've followed him. They've called for reinforcements. More cars have turned up. As he's got out with his 12-year-old son to get a takeaway, they've jumped out, they've beaten with bats, beaten with poles. There was an explosion of violence in Luton, but we didn't understand at the time, coming from the Muslim community. When we go back and speak to the elders in our community, it seemed to have been stemming from the Gulf invasion. After the Gulf, something was happening in Luton, which none of us knew about. Yeah? And it's only later, as I get in my life, which I'll get to, that I started to understand, this is what's made it. This is what this is. Because there was always something different, which I didn't put down to the Muslim community, because at the time it wasn't about them being Muslims, it was just the Pakistanis are very different. That's how I saw it. But Mark Sharp, they snapped a knife off in his head and killed him. He survived for 3-4 days in hospital. I remember his family left the town. The Pakistanis all went on the run. They got them back in the end from Pakistan. I think they got 4 years. It's not justice. They got 4 years for a brutal murder where 6 to 8 of them jumped all over him, snapped knife off his head in front of his son.
Wait, did that change? Or, because it sounds like 2 of them were convicted of murder, and then 2 other got, and then 4 of them got manslaughter. Unless they appealed those murder convictions or something. He's not quoting that correctly, but...
So I remember seeing all these things. And then my cousin, when she was being prostituted in the end, the police would say she's a drug addict. Because she was on heroin, because they got her hooked on heroin. Now, and I remember even when I got a chance on Jeremy Paxman years later, and I remember saying to Jeremy Paxman, when I went on in 2010, and it hasn't aged well for him. And when I went on the chat show, I said, they're picking our daughters up from schools. They're picking our sisters up from schools. The gangs are operating so different. They're not challenged. And he was like, really? You expect us to believe this? I remember saying, Jeremy, do you know anyone who's hooked on heroin sold to them by a Muslim gang? You don't. I do. Do you know anyone who's been killed by a Muslim gang? You don't. I do. Do you know any girls that now wear full niqabs that aren't allowed to see their family? You don't, do you? I do. Do you know anyone who's been prostituted and groomed? You don't, do you? I do. Yeah? I said, so I don't expect you to understand, but I do expect you to listen, because this is happening in the reason why the English Defence League has gone bang is because what I've seen is mirrored across every working class community in this country.
If Islam was to evolve, which it needs to evolve, to fit in with Western democracy, which is clearly not. Clearly there's a problem. Clearly the English Defence League is a phenomenon that swept this country. And with the issues I'm talking about, Jeremy, if I ask you, do you know anyone that's hooked on heroin sold to them by Muslim gangs? You probably don't. I do. Do you know any beautiful girls that you went to school with that are now wearing a burqa that don't see their family? Probably don't. I do. Do you know anyone who's been murdered by a Muslim gang? You probably don't. I do. Do you know any 15-year-old girls that you know that you've grown up with that have been raped or pimped? You don't. So I don't expect you to understand
These are all personal issues of yours.
Personal issues in towns and cities like mine that are happening, and they're not happening with the Sikh community, they're not happening with the Jewish community.
And indeed, they're not happening with most Muslims.
No, they're happening within the Islamic community. That's what I'm saying, that it's an Islamic problem. And when I'm just a simple person, so I'm just a normal person, but when I'm looking at, I have to look for where this hatred is coming from.
So are you seriously suggesting there aren't white drug dealers and there aren't white gangs?
Of course I'm not. No,
or Sikh gangs or any other kind of...
No, I'm not, but I'm saying some of these specific issues are coming from the Islamic community, solely the Islamic community. Terrorists wanting to blow us up, constant hostile activity towards our youth, all these problems. And from sitting back, there's got to be something it's coming from. None of the other communities are spreading it, so we're a symptom of the problem. The English Defence League...
You're claiming that community is spreading it. Actually, what we're talking about here... Yes, exactly, as you could talk about members of the white community doing all sorts of atrocious things.
Yeah, but not 24-year-old groups of 10 of them hanging around outside school gates.
You've never seen a white gang?
And purposely targeting...
Never seen a white gang?
Are we going to pretend that Muslim groups are not out there purposely targeting our youth and pimping them? Are we going to pretend it's not?
You're not pretending white people aren't doing that?
Not in the same manner, not in the same group. They're saying it's a cultural thing which is going on within their community.
But that was, so I grew up in Luton. I've seen all these problems. And again, I'm going to reiterate again, that doesn't mean, because some of the best lads I know were Muslim lads, at school. But when there's a divide, and I'll explain the story again. When there's a divide, something very different happens with this. I remember coming out of a nightclub in Luton, and I remember seeing about 6 Muslims beating one man. And it was my ex-wife said, stop them. And I remember going in to pull them off him, and then they attack you. And then as it's all going on, a Muslim friend of mine stood on their side against us. And he didn't even know him. And afterwards I spoke to him, and the whole town's going, there's all this chaos going on. It's us and them. The divide, you can think you're friends, it's us and them. When that divide line comes, it's us and them. And that divide, which I never understood again, I'll tell you the moment
Oh, that's true, actually. Wait, for the Mark Sharp guy, well, hold on. If somebody's from Pakistan, is it a good assumption that they're probably Muslim? Is that like a fair assumption? I don't know what the percentage of Pakistani immigrants to the UK are in terms of their religious. Oh, okay. Are these names? I don't know. When I see names and I don't recognize where the fuck it comes from at all, my assumption is they're Pakistani. Are these names all Pakistani names? So it's probably a fair assumption that these guys were Muslim, right? From that one murder, from the Mark Sharp case. I don't know anything about this one that he's talking about now, but
I understood it. But all this is going on. I'm seeing lots of changes in the town, seeing a level of aggression, a level of hate, race, criminality. Fast forward to 2000 and to when I'm 19, I think. I'm doing my apprenticeship. I left school at 16. I got an apprenticeship as an aeronautical engineer at Britannia Airways. I went to work there, and I saw. Do you remember the Beslan school massacre?
Yeah.
So
in Russia.
That was my trip.
So for people who don't know, Chechen terrorists took over a school. They held it, I think, for 1 or 2 days, and then the Russian special forces went in, and it was a bloodbath.
And for people who don't know, that's coming to the UK. I think that's so. This happens. Chechen terrorists take over the school, and I can still see it, because and this was my real. Everyone's had that moment that wakes them up. Everyone's had that moment that I think a lot of people would wish they could just close their eyes to it. I think once you're awake to this and you understand some of the problems, you can't turn off from it. But they take over a school, not one Muslim, not two, a whole massive gang of them, jihadists. Take over a school. The parents then get phone calls, so they know their children are in the school. They know terrorists have got their kids. The parents come to the school gates, the military there, the Russian army there, and the parents are outside, and the women are dropping on their knees, holding their heads, as then you start hearing the Muslims butchering their kids, and they're killing them and butchering them. And I remember watching it, going, "What the hell is this? What the hell is going on here?" Yeah. That was my moment to start looking at Islam. And 2 weeks after this, I saw a group in Luton called Al Mujahideen. The leader, the second in command of that group was a gentleman called Saif al-Islam, which translates as Sword of Islam. He's in a chicken shop in Luton, and he's doing an interview. And in that interview, he says, an attack like Beslan would be justified on a British school. And this is when I'm probably, I don't know, I might have been 19. I can't remember. I was young. And I'll be honest, and from my background growing up in Luton, as I said, Luton is so people understand the town, it's probably one of the most poverty-stricken towns in the country. It's a rough and violent town. It has a lot of problems. Take Islam out of the equation, it's still got a million problems, yeah? It's, and growing up there, I'd say chisel's who you become. But I grew up and I looked up.
For the Chechen stuff, I don't know enough of the details. The only thing I remember from this is apparently there's a big hostage situation, and when Russian special forces went in, I don't think you can do like hostage situations against Russian people or like the Russian military, because they'll just run in and fucking kill everybody. I don't think they give a fuck. And I thought that was the big deal with that. But like, there's a lot of bad blood between Chechens and like Russians and the ownership of that. I don't know what the fuck you even call it, territory or whatever the fuck you call it in Russia. Was this like a Muslim extremist thing, or the Beslan school siege? Also referred to as the Beslan school hostage crisis or the Beslan massacre, was a terrorist attack that occurred from September 1st, 2004 to September 3rd, 2004, lasted 3 days, involved the imprisonment of more than 1,100 people as hostages, including 777 children, and it ended with the deaths of 367 people. Crisis began when a group of armed terrorists occupied school number 1 in the town of Beslan, North Ossetia, an autonomous republic in the North Caucasus region of Russia. On September 1st, the hostage takers were members of the Riyadus Salihin, sent by the Chechen warlord Shamil Basayev, who demanded Russia withdraw from and recognize the independence of Chechnya. On the third day of the standoff, Russian security forces stormed the building. I don't know the details about this. I just know that I think it's the second Chechen war or whatever is considered like one of the most destructive, like Russia basically just bombed and shelled like entire cities out of existence. This was like Aleppo before Aleppo. So would I call this like Muslim extremism? I mean, like even if they were Muslims, I feel like this is like territorial, crazy war of independence. Like, I'm not saying this is good. You should never do terrorist attacks, but I don't know if I would just look at something that's like, oh, Muslim extremism. Oh, maybe the first Chechen war was bad, not the second one. Sorry, I might have them mixed up. Both were really bad. Okay. Grozny is the city that I'm thinking of that people usually cite, I think. Grozny 2014 bombing. Someday we'll read more about this. After we bang your mom. Okay.
up to my uncle's rule.
I feel like it's a little crazy to see this and be like, oh my God, this is coming to the United Kingdom. I feel like that's kind of a crazy extrapolation, but okay.
And then as it's all going on, a Muslim friend of mine, lots of changes in the town, seeing Britannia Airways. I went to work there.
And terrorists took over a school.
School massacre.
Yeah.
So
in Russia.
In Russia, that was my trip.
So for people who don't know, Chechen terrorists took over a school. They held it, I think, for 1 or 2 days, and then the Russian special forces went in, and it was a bloodbath.
And for people who don't know, that's coming to the UK. I think that's so. This happens. Chechen.
Like that's okay.
So Chechen terrorists take over the school, and I can still see it, yeah, because and this was my real. You know, everyone's had that moment that wakes them up. Everyone's had that moment that I think a lot of people would wish they could just close their eyes to it. I think once you're awake to this and you understand some of the problems, you can't turn off from it. But they take over a school, not one Muslim, not two, a whole massive gang of them, yeah, jihadists, take over a school. The parents
were they actually jihadists even? Fuck, I don't know enough about the background and everything of Chechnya or whatever, or what they were even. But it's. I feel like this is kind of a weird retelling of the conflict between Russia and their hold on Chechnya or whatever. But okay.
Then get phone calls, so they know their children are in the school. They know terrorists have got their kids. The parents come to school gates. The military are there, you know, the Russian army are there, and the parents are outside. And the women are dropping on their knees, holding their heads. As then you start hearing the Muslims butchering their kids, and they're killing them and butchering them. And I remember watching it, going, "What the hell is this? What the hell is going on here?" Yeah. So that was my moment to start looking at Islam. And 2 weeks after this, I saw a group in Luton called Al-Mujahideen. The leader, the second in command of that group was a gentleman called Saif al-Islam, which translates as Sword of Islam. He's in a chicken shop in Luton and he's doing an interview. And in that interview, he says, an attack like Beslan would be justified on a British school. And this is when I'm probably, I don't know, I might have been 19. I can't remember. I was young. And I'll be honest, and from my background growing up in Luton, as I said, Luton is so people understand the town. It's probably one of the most poverty-stricken towns in the country. It's a rough and violent town.
Destiny, they were actually all transgendered. Okay.
It has a lot of problems. Take Islam out of the equation, it's still got a million problems, yeah? It's, and growing up there, I'd say chisels who you become. But I grew up and I looked up to my uncle's rule lead members of Luton's football hooligan scene. So whilst I went to school, stayed out of trouble, I was always in the group that was getting in trouble, the likely lads, but I never got involved in any criminality, whereas a lot of the kids I grew up with did. My mum, probably because of my mum and her parenting, my mum was strict, but I done my apprenticeship. But when I saw this, I was a young lad full of testosterone, and I used to go to the football element with Luton Town football scene. And when I watched this Muslim say this, I thought, who's this man? And then I looked at him, and I understood Al-Mujahideen. Now remember, there wasn't a terrorist attack in the UK until 2007, was it? So there hadn't been a terrorist attack. No one understood jihad.
Yeah.
I look at this group, Al-Mujahideen, who are now a prescribed terrorist organisation, but at the time they weren't. And I look and they're holding weekly events in our town centre outside Don Miller's bakery, outside the local bakery. So I looked at them, they were a global caliphate network, and their head office was on Biscuit Road, which is where we're from. And it's like, who the hell are this lot? And in my presentation at Oxford University, I showed, so after September 11th, like when you went to your local shops, I don't know what it was like, but at my local shops, there was not pictures of the 19 suicide bombers with Magnificent 19. Mm-hmm. It was celebrated in Luton. It was celebrated at a local college. They held a march for the anniversary, first year through the town centre. So it was celebrated. September 11th was celebrated.
Openly. People just openly celebrating
posters
terrorist
everywhere.
attack.
Look at my presentation at Oxford University. I showed the posters at my shop and all over the phone boxes, all over the shop.
Does anybody have a link to this? Is this true or?
It's Magnificent 19. Yeah, it was celebrated. And so I looked at this group and I went down the town centre the next Saturday and I'll be honest, it was celebrated to them. And I looked at, they were a global caliphate network and their head office was on Biscuit Road, which is where we're from. And it's like, who the hell are this lot? And in my presentation at Oxford University, I showed, so after September 11th, like when you went to your local shops, I don't know what it was like, but at my local shops, there was not pictures of the 19 suicide bombers with Magnificent 19. Mm-hmm. It was celebrated in Luton. It was celebrated at a local college.
Luton, September 11th, Muslims celebrating, what? City Journal. Jihadist mullahs urge 1,000 followers to learn the murderous lessons of the World Trade Center attacks. An obscene spectacle took place in North London. Is that where Luton is? On September 11, 2002, 1,000 Muslims gathered at the Finsbury Park Mosque to celebrate the bombings of the World Trade Center. The Metropolitan Police deployed a force 500 strong to protect the meeting, called a towering day in history from disruption. A dozen or so menacing-looking men with keffiyehs over their faces stood on the mosque steps to prevent unfriendly journalists from entering. The celebration began promptly at 1 p.m. so that participants could applaud the action of the WTC bombers at exactly 1:46 London time, the exact time a year earlier when the first plane hit its targets in New York. Chairing the meeting was Abu Hamza, an Egyptian-born engineer turned Muslim mullah who presides over the notorious Finsbury Park Mosque, where several of the detainees in Camp Delta, Guantanamo Bay, captured fighting for the Taliban and Al-Qaeda, received their theological training. Hamza also reportedly recruited to the jihad Richard Reed, the would-be shoe bomber who failed to blow up fuck this guy. This is the guy where we all have to fucking do, where we had to take our shoes off and everything for TSA, although I think they got rid of that like a year ago finally. Maybe, I think. The good imam is implicated as well in the training and instigation of Zacharias Moussaoui under arrest on suspicion of conspiring with the 19 murderers of September 11th.
Imagine this is your town where you live. You've got posters glorifying terrorism. You've got billboards. As you walk up your street, the billboards are now painted over. Anything showing a woman's flesh is covered up. This is all to fit in with Sharia. And it's from certain sections.
Look at what this guy looks like. Wait a second. Does this guy kind of look like in Men in Black 3? Do you remember Boris the Animal?
Minority, but a dangerous minority within the town. I want to take you through on what you're trying to understand as me growing up. The changes I'm seeing, they're not for the good, okay? They're not for freedom. So this will just show some posters.
Okay.
That's the covering up on billboards. The Magnuson 19 posters on a phone box. At the same time, Icknield High School.
Wait.
Me growing up, the changes I'm seeing, they're not for the good, okay? They're not for freedom. So this will just show some posters.
What? This is a picture. Is there, also this is first 2003, maybe they celebrate it again the next year though? But this is like a picture, or this is like an actual image file. Where's a picture of this poster hung up somewhere? Those are the stickers? Where? Or does he show, maybe he'll show them?
Covering up on billboards, the Magnuson 19.
Oh, I see, okay. It's just a low resolution picture, I can't fucking see shit, okay.
Posters on a phone box.
That's it there.
At the same time, Icknield High School. Many of you may remember the girl who ordered the full face valve in the cab to school. Sherry Blair represented her. Yeah? When she left there, when she got kicked out of that school for doing that, she went to the school I used to go to, Putridge. But her brother was part of Al-Mujahideen, an extremist organisation. They used to protest outside the school all the time, this Icknield High School. They then had, at the same time, every year, they're outside the school handing out leaflets saying Christmas is a sin. Children are just trying to go to school, trying to paint a picture that things are going on across the town at this time. Now,
is there video footage of this or anything for London Muslims Celebrate 9/11 on 2002? Apparently there's a right-wing publication, but I doubt this whole thing is fake. I doubt that they would just fake all of this. I'm just curious. It's not good. If it's here, definitely not good. He made it sound like it was hung up inside every establishment. Yeah, I'm just curious how widespread this is. It would have been nice to see more pictures, but I don't know. Okay.
They held a march for the anniversary, first year through the town centre. So it was celebrated. September 11th was celebrated.
Openly. People just openly celebrating.
Posters everywhere. Look at my presentation at Oxford University. I show the posters at my shop, and all over the phone boxes, all over the shops, Magnificent 19. Yeah, it was celebrated. And
I feel like I only saw that. Does he show more? Hold on.
This is a newspaper article. If you want to take one of them and pass them around, people can read them themselves. This I feel is very important. I think it's very important to show you where we were at in the town. This newspaper article is from September 2004. We're going back 10 years. Okay, I was 21 years old. Anti-terror rally. I organised this rally when I was 21 years old. I made these leaflets. Okay, this will show you that the English Defence League may have been born in 2009.
Okay, CNN article. A UK-based Islamist group is planning a conference on September 11th, hailing the suicide attackers who killed thousands in New York City and Washington as the Magnificent 19. The group is Al-Muhajirun, or I can't pronounce that. Anything that calls themselves, by the way, Islamic and Islamist are two very different things. Islamist is like militant commitment to spreading the ideas of Islam. Islamist is always bad. Islamist is always bad. Islamic is a broader term or whatever, but just keep that in mind, okay? The poster seen on the group's website also shows images of Al-Qaeda leader Osama bin Laden superimposed on a picture of the World Trade Center. Reported the group plans to hold conferences in 4 British cities: London, Birmingham, Leicester, and Manchester. You guys, fuck this fucking con. To mark December 11th, 2001 anniversary, British authorities and police came out on the group. And mainstream Muslim groups have denounced Al-Muhajirun as a radical organizer that misrepresents the views of the country's 2 million Muslims. But a spokesman for the group, Abu Omar, said this week that the actions of the 19 hijackers were quite splendid. Omar said Muslims who condemned the attacks were apostates, whose opinion should carry no weight.
There's a history behind it. When the Beslan massacre, remember the Beslan massacre? The school children were lined up and murdered by Chechnyan terrorists. They killed loads of kids in front of their parents. I remember watching that. And then I remember watching an interview of a Muslim from Luton. His name's Saif al-Islam, it means Sword of Islam. He was part of this organisation called Al-Mujahideen, and he said what happened at that school was justified. And it's justified if it happens in a school in England. That is when I started reading, learning, and looking into who this group were. Al-Mujahideen.
Damn, he really repeats the same fucking stories for how many years? Holy shit. Okay, based. All right.
I doubt many people in 2004 had heard of them. Remember, this is before 7/7. This is before terrorist atrocities on our shores. I found that Omar Bakri and Abu Hamza, we all know who they are now. They were based in my town, in Luton. They were based there. Their head office was on Biscuit Road. I started looking, researching. What I found terrified me. And once my eyes were open, I couldn't close them to this issue. I made these leaflets. In these leaflets, it's clear. Leaflets circulated in Luton before the demonstration.
Okay.
So I looked at this group, and I went down the town centre the next Saturday, and I'll be honest, because on a Saturday, back then, as a young man, there might be 100 of us on a Saturday that would go to Luton football. And we'd travel around the country going to football together as young men. And I looked at this group, and when I went down there, there's a police officer there. And I said, and they were openly, like now they try and hide it, they were openly recruiting to send people to fight against our armed forces in Iraq and Afghanistan. They were openly promoting jihad. It was, remember this is at the time when Abu Hamza, Hook, when he was holding his seminars in Finsbury Park, when he had hundreds of men on the floor. This is at the time when Abu Hamza, the fight against our armed forces in Iraq and Afghanistan. They were openly promoting jihad.
Well, like, I mean, the Iraq-Iran war, like, this is like Muslim on Muslim violence. This is a huge war, no? I mean, like, I feel like he's oversimplifying a lot of regional stuff. I feel like everybody that talks about Islam does this. And it's annoying, too, because I don't like the radical, the weirdo Islamic people. I don't like these people at all. But I feel like he's collapsing a lot of stuff.
It was, remember, this is at the time when Abu Hamza, Hook, when he was holding his seminars in Finsbury Park, when he
This was the guy that we just
had
looked at.
hundreds of men on the floor in the road.
But apparently other mainstream Muslims were denouncing him, and he said those guys are fake losers. But I don't know what the names of those other mainstream people are, or how relevant anybody in particular is. It's hard to say.
Calling for war against Britain. Remember, they weren't getting a nick on hate speech or anything like that. They were just allowed to do it. So as I looked at this group, I thought they've been operating, a mass network have been operating for 20 years in my town, which then explains, and I tried having this, I sat down with Bim
I thought
on.
he was talking about the NATO-Iraq war. Oh, shit. I'm sorry. He might have been. I'm sorry. My brain just wiped. Well, because Iraq, I think, almost went to war again with Iran after... fuck, I don't even remember. It was after we deposed the leadership, the Ba'ath government, and we put in everybody. But I don't think that would ever been big enough to recruit from. Wait. So is he saying they were trying to openly recruit people to go and fight against, like, NATO in Iraq and everything? The timeline would make more sense. That
police officer there.
I think. Okay, hold on.
And they were openly, like, now they try and hide it. They were openly recruiting to send people to fight against our armed forces in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Oh, I'm sorry. He's saying to fight against our own, I think is what he's saying, right? F***ing accents. He means to fight against our own forces. That's what he's saying. Sorry. Jesus. Right?
They were openly promoting jihad. It was, remember this, fight against our armed forces in Iraq and Afghanistan.
To fight against armed. That's what he's saying. He's to fight against our armed forces. Armed.
They're openly recruiting to send people to fight against our armed forces in Iraq and Afghanistan. They were openly promoting jihad. It was, remember this is at the time when Abu Hamza, Hook, when he was holding his seminars in Finsbury Park, when he had hundreds of men on the floor in the road, calling for war against Britain. Remember, they weren't getting a nick on hate speech or anything like that. They were just allowed to do it. So as I looked at this group, I thought they've been operating, a mass network have been operating for 20 years in my town, which then explains, and I tried having this, I sat down with Bim Arms when we started the English Defence League and explained to him, your community, the Islamic community, is very entrenched. It's inward looking. You're all here. Now within this little community, you've got, let's just say 200. We've got more. Let's say 200 pure radicals who are working 25 days, 7 days a week. And they're working to promote jihad, supremacy, intolerance against the non-Muslim community. So once they've operated all these years, the explosions of violence that are coming out, and they weren't just coming out onto us in the streets. Remember, 7/7 bomb plot, they picked up their bombs in Luton. A fertiliser bomb plot, come out of Luton. Stockholm bomber, come out of Luton. Luton was named by the CIA as the epicenter of terrorist atrocities and the planning for Europe. That's Luton. So when people are saying, I said, well, you know these lads, like the ones who were killed fighting for ISIS, the ones who, Saif al-Islam, who's done jail for terrorism, Roger Ibrahim, the ginger convert, I used to hang around with him as a kid. So we're not talking about, when you read about terrorists, to some people this is a million miles away. I went to school with that mug. I queue up next to him in the bank. His sister lives around the corner from me. So this isn't a million miles away from us. So when in 2004, I went down town centre, the police were there. I said, what is this? How are they allowed to do this? She said it's free speech. I said, okay, let's see if it's free speech next week. And then the next week, I organised my first ever protest, which was called Ban the Luton Taliban. That's what I called it. And
Tommy, can we pause there for 1 second? Because one thing that I wanted to ask you about, and honestly, I'm not coming at it from a place of judgment, but I do think it's an important part of the conversation. You mentioned the football hooligans, right, which you were part of. A lot of people, it's not a uniquely British thing now that you get these ultras in Italy, you get them in Russia. But it is kind of, to most people who don't know about it, they really don't know about it, right? So can you explain the firms and the hooligans? Because you say you go around the country supporting Luton, but it's more than that, right? It's young lads who like to get to a football game and have a fight with others, right? Is that fair?
That's fair.
If you're someone who values free inquiry and independent thinking, which, let's be honest, is why you're probably watching Trigonometry, then our sponsor, Venice AI, gives you the freedom ourselves. And if you're UK, thanks to the new scene and not offended by grown-up content or ideas, you'll need to sign up for a pro account. If you want to use AI without fear of handing over your thoughts, ideas, or personal information to a corporation or the government,
I look at the problem from which is
AI/trigonometry and see what you've been missing. And now, back to the show.
That's fair, which is going to sound moronic. Yeah? So most people watching this are going to think, idiots. Absolutely idiots. But remember, I'm 42 years old now, and I'm a father of 3. I was 20. I was 18, 17, 16. Young men. Yeah? Young men finding their identity together, which I'd say I found my identity going to football. I found it. Yeah? And when I say I found it, I look at the problem in Luton, and I look at the erosion of our identity as young English men. It's gone. And I'll give an example. When it's St. Patrick's Day in Luton, there's a 3-day festival for St. Patrick's Day. When it's St. Lucian Day, yeah, we have a massive tents, park, fairgrounds, everything. Yeah. When it's Eid, the whole place is locked off. Everything. They've got fairs. They've got everything. When it's St. George's Day, it's banned. Yeah? So we're made to feel ashamed. Anyway, I remember it was St. George's Day, and the school, Icknield High School. Now, do you remember the Trojan Horse?
Fuck, there's so much like cultural shit here that I can't do. This would take me so long to chew through all of this. I know that every time I've looked up like legal stuff that Tommy Robinson is involved in, he says one thing publicly, but it feels like he's in the wrong when you actually dig into things. Like I remember a while ago there was something where he said that his freedom of speech was under attack because he couldn't criticize some person, but I don't know if it had to do with some court case or whatever. But the reality is that I think he was trying to get into the courthouse, and then 2, in Britain you're allowed to gag trials that are ongoing so as to not sway the jury or whatever. Like that's just a thing that in the UK they have that law, or in England or whatever they have that law, and he would continually break this over and over and over again until he would get arrested, and then he would say, well, it's because they don't like that I'm talking about Muslims or whatever. But I don't just any court related thing, or like defamation cases he's lost and everything too, which I think if there are several. But for all this like cultural norm stuff, I would have to look into so much stuff I just don't know. Somebody's saying St. George is the patron saint of England. It's never been a massive celebration day. Like I don't know how true or not true that is. I have no idea. Should look at this. What is this? A 16-year-old youth was shown on video assaulting a 15-year-old Syrian refugee boy in a playground attack. The attack took place at Almondbury Community School on October 25th, 2018. The headmaster condemned the attack once it had received nationwide media attention. On July 22nd, 2021, Tommy Robinson, activist and founder of the EDL, the English Defence League, was found to have libeled the Syrian boy, who was ordered to pay £100,000 plus legal costs, which runs to amount to a further £500,000. Jesus. An injunction was also granted to stop Robinson from repeating the libel. After breaching that injunction, Robinson was sentenced to 18 months in prison in October of 2024. Oh, well, damn. The clips show the victim with his arm in a cast being dragged to the floor by his neck as his attacker says, "I'll drown you." And what he's saying now on a school playing field while forcing water from a bottle into the victim's mouth. The video was filmed on a lunch break. The clip shows the victim walking away without reacting as the attacker, and as can be heard, continued to verbally assault him. The victim, a Syrian refugee, had previously suffered a broken wrist. This had been investigated by the police, who had interviewed 3 youths, but took no further action. No further action was taken as the evidential test required to prosecute was not met. Subsequently, a separate video emerged of a girl, reportedly the younger sister of the Syrian refugee, also being assaulted on the school playground. Damn. Previously, a girl forcibly removed the girl's hijab. The attacker was excluded from the school over the incident. Director of Advocacy at the Refugee Council, Lisa Doyle, said the idea that someone escapes war and brutality only to be met with violence here is truly awful. What was the Tommy Robinson claim? Tommy Robinson used photos taken from a 2017 article about a teenage cancer patient from Surrey, Canada, or... I don't like how we have a lot of the same names from over here. We should have named shit different stuff. I don't like that. It confuses the fuck out of me. Okay. About a teenage cancer patient from Surrey in the UK or whatever. Okay, in England. Okay. To claim incorrectly, we should have... You copied us. We upgraded. You should rename your shit, okay? You. Hours after spreading... Okay. To claim incorrectly, the Syrian refugee had previously attacked 2 schoolgirls. Hours after spreading the claims, during 2 Facebook Live broadcasts, Robinson admitted to his followers that he had helped spread fake news, saying that he had been duped. He said, "I've been completely had. How embarrassing, man." The mother of a girl who'd been alleged to have been attacked posted to Robinson's Facebook page that Jamal was not the attacker. The Syrian refugee's family's lawyers issued a letter to Robinson stating, "We wish to place you on notice that our client intends legal action against you in respect to these contents of these publications, and you will be receiving pre-action correspondence." CNN International reported Robinson had deleted the videos and admitted to posting a fake photograph falsely purporting to show violence by a Muslim gang. Robinson's reporters said that the letter warning about legal action blocked free speech. The lawyer responded by stating that Robinson is being held to account for lying about a child and thinks it's a good idea to defame this 15-year-old boy and accuse him of being the author of his own bullying. It is actually sickening. Facebook protects prominent figures such as Robinson with normal rules of moderation that would see a page removed after posting content that violates the rules. On April 21st, 2021, the trial started. Why is this like a Ted Cruz thing? Like, I'm sorry. In the United States, Ted's name, I think is, I don't know if he even legally changed his name, but he was born as Raphael. And then at some point, he changed his name to like Ted or something, or Theodore. I don't even know if his name is Theodore. I think it's just Ted now. To be like more American. I feel like Tommy Robinson, that's like a good old, is that like a good old boy English name? But his actual name is Stephen Christopher Yaxley Lennon. Why did he change his name legally, or is this just his like online name, or is that even more British? Tommy 10 names. His real name sounds less working class. Okay. Well, Catherine Evans, QC, representing Jamal Hizaji, told the court that Robinson's comments turned Jamal into the aggressor and the bully into the righteous white knight. The trial heard evidence from former pupils, all 5 who supported and defended Lennon. The judge disbelieved them. On July... Wait, what? Trial heard evidence from former pupils, all 5 who defended Lennon. Oh, that's Tommy Robinson, right? So found to have libeled the boy and was ordered to pay $100,000. An injection was also granted. Robinson represented himself during the 4-day trial, said he was gobsmacked by the cost of the boy's lawyers were claiming, which he said included 70,000 pounds of taking witness statements. He added, "I've not got any money. I'm bankrupt. I've struggled hugely with my own issues these last 12 months. I ain't got it." In May of 2023, Robinson's film Silence was released. In the film, he repeats his defamatory claims about the boy. Wait, really? No shot. He depicts the incident and the resulting fallout as a story about how the law is being manipulated and exploited by the far left and Islamists to destroy the lives of anyone who speaks out against the so-called progressive, so-called liberal narrative. Robinson was due to appear at a high court hearing on July 29, 2024 after being accused of contempt of court for making the film, but instead fled the country. An arrest warrant issued after he left the country to be enacted in October should he fail to appear to follow up hearing. Ahead of that hearing on the 20th of October in Woolwich Crown Court, Robinson was held custody after handing himself in to Folkestone Police Station.
Press actually left court when the witnesses stood up to give their evidence in my defence. It's alarming to think this. People were lying, but about what Jamal was like. 12 different people lying about what Jamal was like. Why? You see, the judge has really helped us out here. The judge says people can lie for reasons that make no sense.
Is that the boy's name, Jamal? Is that what he's talking about here?
Sometimes, for no reason at all. He could not readily identify any explanation for why some of these people were prepared to do so and lie. He concludes the alleged assaults, they never happened at all. Despite Jamal's school record, which you've seen, the judge states the claimant's record is overwhelmingly positive. He acknowledged Jamal has a record of lying, but decides on this occasion it's Jamal who's telling the truth and everyone else is lying. Really? We waited 10 weeks for this? That's your conclusion? That's the logic from the highest libel judge in our land? There was no jury. That's right, there's no jury. All of these people were lying, but Jamal, he was telling the truth. Jamal, who could only find his dad, Jihad, to speak for him. Not a single teacher, not a classmate, not a friend, not a neighbour or a support worker came to court to support Jamal's version of events. Jamal, who says he only broke the rules a few times at school, and even then, it weren't his fault. His school record suggests something very different. I want to be clear and fair to Jamal. He denies every accusation against him, completely and utterly. On the day the 5 courageous children appeared in the dock, giving testimony against Jamal. Jamal didn't even show up in court that day to face his accusers. Neither did the press. The press actually left court when the witnesses stood
to face his accusers? Well, but you were the one on trial, no? Or trial, would you even say this? A civil case, I guess? I don't know.
Up to give their evidence in my defence. It's alarming to think we have this kind of intellect at the top of our judiciary. The story of these 2 children is actually a story about free speech, or the death of it. It's a story about how the mainstream media is more interested in pushing an agenda than giving you...
Who were the 5 people that came to testify on Tommy's behalf? Were they the people that were bullying him in the video? Is that... Why, does he say, or... Oh, nice. Totally irrelevant fuck link, which is exactly why... Oh.
Balance and truth. How it continues, despite Leveson, to act with impunity. Is the media held to account for what they report? Have Piers Morgan or Jeremy Vine been held to account? No. It's a story about how the law is being manipulated and exploited by the far left and Islamists to destroy the lives of anyone who high court to speak the truth.
So let me just look at one of the pupils that come to court and because obviously for me this was threatening phone calls a week before a high court trial, trying to pervert the course of justice. How come no one's been arrested?
Oh wait, is this whole film about his trial? Is that what the entire film is about? Oh, it's not just a little bit.
Weaponise the law system against us and how the legal system really only works for the rich. And finally...
Oh, he made this during the trial.
How do we keep our politicians accountable? If the police, the court, are bothered about intellectual and social progress, should we be silenced by the demands of Mufti Pandor and Sharia law? Should we sacrifice Mohammed?
pushed off him, fell and broke his arm. The police considered the incident to have been dealt with properly.
He started calling my mum a white fat bitch and stuff, and then he like...
He started calling your mummy
a white fat bitch.
a white fat bitch.
And then I went up to him, and then I chucked a bottle at him, and then he put me in a headlock, and then my mate pushed him off me.
And I believe that's how he broke his arm?
Yeah.
There's all sorts of misconceptions, like the fact that he had a broken arm.
Oh, I've got two independent witnesses
No,
now.
he hit a year 8 kid. And another kid in year 11 stepped in and said, what are you doing? Pushed him over, broke his arm.
Who he had in the headlock.
It must have been just out of year 11.
Wait, well, doesn't that mean he had a broken arm? wait, I'm so confused. Wait, what?
And I believe that's how he broke his arm?
Yeah.
There's all sorts of misconceptions, like the fact that he had a broken arm.
There's misconceptions like the fact that he had a broken arm.
Oh, I've got two independent witnesses now.
No, he hit a year 8 kid.
He had an 8-year-old kid.
And another kid in year 11 stepped in and said, what are you doing? Pushed him over.
And then pushed him over and then
Who he
broke
had
his arm.
in the headlock.
It must have been just out
Okay.
of year 11. Put this kid in a headlock. One of my friends wasn't having it. Didn't like how he was behaving. Grabbed him and just threw him off him. Like anyone do break up a fight, they just like throw him off him. But this wasn't a fight. This was an all-out brawl,
Oh,
one-sided.
sorry. Year 8 is 13-year-old, not 8-year-old.
Completely one-sided. Because this kid had no match against Jamal. Just threw him off him and he landed on a curb.
Damn.
How big was the kid?
Jamal's in year 11.
Yeah, half the size of Jamal easily.
Okay. You know, I know he was 12 and Jamal was 15.
But it was like kind of like half size-ish, kind of like up to shoulders kind of thing.
Yeah.
But he still had no match against him. And my friend just grabbed him, threw him off him, he landed on a curb. That was like it.
So I've read it reported in by Jeremy Vine and in the newspapers that that was an incident of Jamal being bullied.
No, exact opposite. He was bullying this kid.
So you see, people thought that was all part of it.
But that's, do you know why
Can somebody be thrown to the floor with a broken arm?
But do you know why they thought it was part of it? Because the solicitor said it was.
No, well, that's not true. That genuinely is not true. I could even name it. I won't. But I could name the child in year 8 that he did it to.
I hate digging into court shit because I feel like I have to read all the... I'd have to read the underlying documents. I don't know what's available for stuff like this. I wonder why he chose to represent himself. He couldn't have, like, GoFundMe raised money for no evidence is public, only arguments and decision? Ugh. Horrible bonger fucks. I'll organize this into questions tomorrow on the flight. I love you guys. I'll be back in 5-7 days or some bullshit whenever the fuck I come back from Bonger land. Be careful. I love you. Stay safe. Don't die.